The red of a stop sign, the red of a cherry candy, the red on a lipstick smudge left on a coffee cup. You don't think about where that red comes from. You've probably heard that modern chemistry gave you these cheap, vibrant colors. But the real reason the world's most valuable red vanished is not what you've been told. It wasn't a chemist who killed it. It was a fungus no one saw coming. A tiny epidemic that crawled across a single island chain tour through an empire of color. This happened decades before synthetic red ever hit the market. This is the story of cochineal, a parasitic insect that once dyed the robes of kings, the coats of British soldiers, the paint on a Rembrandt canvas, and it's the story of how a hidden disease changed the color of your world. Cochineal is a scale insect, no bigger than a grain of rice. It lives on the pads of prickly pear cactus. The female produces carminic acid, a chemical weapon against predators. When you crush tens of thousands of their dried bodies, the acid becomes a dye called carmine. A red so intense it seems to glow from within. For centuries, this red was worth more than gold. The Aztecs and Incas cultivated it long before Europeans arrived. When Spanish conquistadors saw the crimson textiles of Tenochtitlan, they knew they'd found something precious. Spain built a monopoly, exporting cochineal to Europe in galleons. The dye colored the robes of cardinals, the red coats of the British Army, and the finest velvets of the Renaissance. A single pound of dried cochineal could cost a merchant a small fortune, and the source remained a secret. Smuggling live insects out of the New World was punishable by death. But a French botanist named Nicolas Joseph Thierry de Menonville managed it in 1777. He stole a few cactus pads and insects from a Mexican plantation. According to historian Amy Butler Greenfield, in her book A Perfect Red, the theft was a years-long mission of botanical espionage. With the secret out, colonial powers scrambled to cultivate cochineal in their own territories. The Canary Islands, off the coast of Africa, became the most successful location. By the 1820s, the islands transformed into a giant cochineal farm. Cactus hedgerows stretched for miles on Lanzarote and Fuerteventura. Thousands of families switched from subsistence farming to the red gold. A harvest could lift a family out of poverty. Landowners built mansions with cochineal money. The port of Santa Cruz de Tenerife brimmed with ships carrying the dried insects to Europe. By the 1850s, the Canary Islands exported over 1,000,000 pounds of cochineal a year. A single pound sold for the equivalent of a month's wages for a laborer. Think about what that meant. A man could feed his family for a month with the price of a handful of dead bugs. The future seemed infinitely red, but the islands had bet everything on one insect. And monocultures have a fatal flaw. They are perfect breeding grounds for disease. In the 1860s, something began to rot the plantations. A fungus started attacking either the cactus or the cochineal directly. The exact pathogen is still debated. Some plant pathologists point to a fusarium wilt. Others suspect an entomopathogenic fungus that infected the insect's soft bodies. The effect was the same. A white, powdery mold spread across the cactus pads. The cochineal insects, normally clustered like barnacles, turned into hollow husks. Entire harvests vanished within weeks. Imagine walking your rows at dawn. You reach out to touch a pad. Crumbles under your fingers. That was the morning of the collapse. A Canarian economic historian named Antonio Macias Hernandez studied the trade records. He found that exports plummeted from over 1,000,000 pounds to barely 200,000 pounds between 1860 and 1870. That's a collapse of over 80%. Families who had invested everything went bankrupt. Children were pulled from school. Men left the islands to find work across the Atlantic. Some never came back. The island's population dipped for the first time in a century. Entire villages became empty except for the old and the cactus. The red that had built mansions now left behind ghost farms and debt. Here is the twist that most histories skip. In 1868, German chemists Carl Graebe and Carl Lieberman finally synthesized alizarin red from coal tar. This was the first synthetic red dye. It was brighter, cheaper, and faster to make than cochineal red. The history books often say that synthetic alizarin killed the cochineal industry, but the numbers tell a different story. By the time Graebe and Lieberman's discovery reached the market, the Canary Islands production was already dead. The fungus had done its work. Synthetic red didn't kill cochineal. It merely buried the body. This is the opposite of the story you usually hear. The story you're told is that progress, brilliant chemistry, rendered natural dyes obsolete. The myth is clean and satisfying. It tells you that innovation wins, that the old dies because it's inferior. But the truth is messier. Sometimes the old dies because it was fragile, not because it was bad. The cochineal industry collapsed from a biological shock, not a technological one. Why do you still blame the wrong killer? Partly because the fungus was invisible. A chemist's flask is photogenic. A mold spreading on a cactus is not, and partly because the myth of progress serves your cultural narrative. You want to believe that the future always beats the past, that the inventions around you naturally supersede nature, but nature often has the last word. Think about the systems you rely on today. The phone in your pocket depends on a handful of rare minerals mined in a few locations. The banana you eat for breakfast, the Cavendish variety, accounts for 99% of bananas sold globally. It's a monoculture, just like the cactus fields. And it's currently threatened by a soil fungus called Tropical Race 4. The echoes of the cochineal fungus are still with you. That fungus, like the one in the Canaries, thrives in genetic uniformity. It exploits a single weakness in a vast population of identical hosts. And your world keeps building more such populations. Soybean fields stretching to the horizon. Chicken farms containing millions of genetically identical birds. Data centers running the same software. Your modern world is a chain of monocultures. The red in your lipstick, your candy, your clothes, it comes from a fragile global chain. Somewhere, a pathogen is already eyeing something in that chain. You don't see it. Neither did the cochineal farmers. They woke up one morning to a white fuzz on their livelihood. And by the time they understood, it was too late. The same could happen to any monoculture you depend on. Your money, your food, your connectivity. The world is full of hidden cochineals. But here's the other side of the story. The fungus didn't end red forever. It just cleared the stage for a new kind of red. Today, most reds are made from petroleum. That lipstick smudge, that candy coating, that stop sign, they're products of synthetic chemistry. But the existence of those synthetic reds is not a simple triumph. It's a response to an earlier catastrophe. The world didn't choose synthetic red because it was better. The world was forced to find a replacement because the old red was gone. And that forced search led to the modern chemical industry. The entire color palette of your world, from the screen you're watching to the clothes in your closet, owes a debt to a fungus in the Canaries. Amy Butler Greenfield wrote that cochineal red was the ghost that haunted the first synthetic dye labs. Chemists knew they were competing with a lost empire, not just a color. The emotional stakes were high. They were trying to resurrect a ghost, and they succeeded in a way. But they never killed the ghost. The ghost was already dead. So next time you see that red stop sign, or that red cherry candy, or that red lipstick smudge on a coffee cup, remember what it's really made of. It's not just atoms from an oil refinery. It's the historical echo of a frantic, failed harvest. It's the memory of a family that lost everything because a microbe ate their future. It's a testament to how fragile the old world was and how fragile yours remains. The red on that stop sign doesn't just mean stop. It also means remember the invisible killers. Remember the threads that connect you to a cactus patch in 1865. Remember that the biggest shifts in history sometimes come from the smallest mouths, and that the color you see today might be the scar tissue of a wound you never knew existed. The red of that stop sign belongs to a fungus. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to our channel. A new story every week,